Welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast for film fans by film fans. Every episode we look at films old and new to choose what should be preserved for all time in our movie vault. With lively topics, big questions and crazy challenges to entertain us and our guests, we always look to have fun by giving you the topics worth discussing and the movies worth watching, even if there are some duds along the way. But don't just take my word for it. Here's a preview of what to expect in today's episode.
Chip, 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 chip. Out of my chip, 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 chip. Fingers fly, chip, 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 chip. Chip, 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 chip. So yeah, that's the chorus.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Are you not entertained? I am your father. Great Scott! Turn up! Here's Johnny. I'll be back.
It's not the baton, it's a very naughty boy.
Well, good movies.
Hello and welcome to Well Good Movies, the podcast that gives you the topics worth discussing and the movies worth watching. Regular listeners may have realised by now that I am not your regular host, taking over for one episode only, following our victory in the Champion of Champions Endgame special. I am your host, Ed Mason, and I'm joined by my co-host. She dragged me to victory in the Endgames, and now she's helping me drag our guest through movie hell today. It's Alexandra McCreadie. Oh, hi, Alex.
I haven't heard you call me Alexandra before. It's very unnerving. Hello, how are you, Ed?
I'm doing all right. Are you looking forward to what we've lined up for our guests today?
Yeah, it's my favourite film. I think it's one of the greatest films ever made, maybe. It just shows that you don't need to be a good actor to make an impeccable film.
Well, as I alluded to movie hell, possibly movie greatness, as we've heard from Alex, and that's because, as she talked about, we're discussing The Room. To be clear, it's not Room, the 2015 Oscar-winning film starring Brie Larson. It's not even the 2019 horror film called The Room that YouTube kept wanting me to buy and assumed I was talking about when I started researching this episode. No, it's the 2003 film directed, written, produced by, and starring Tommy Wiseau, the auteur of the moment, which has gained a reputation for being a really, really bad film. But, we just heard from Alex that maybe it's one of the best films ever. So is it really that bad? Is it so bad that it's good? That's what we're talking about today. And so here to help us with that, we couldn't keep him off his own podcast for long. It's David Osgar. Oh, hi, David.
Hello. This is very strange.
How are you doing? How does it feel being a guest rather than the host?
I know, it's usually if somebody does take over, it's like Craig or someone. So it's, very odd. I was even thinking earlier today, I was just like going over the intro in my mind. And I was like, wait, I don't even have to do this.
And also like me saying the sorts of lines that you end up saying as well. Does it feel like, when you listen to a recording back and it's not quite your voice, it's like, wait, this isn't actually my voice.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I know it's. I suppose everyone puts their spin on it as well, which is a nice thing. So it is refreshing in a way, but it's also like, when you've like written down a speech or something, and then you hear somebody else reading it, and you're just like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have gone about it that way, but fair enough.
Are you saying that I'm doing a substandard and that you wouldn't have done it this way? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Unbelievable.
I'm happy with the changes.
He's already trying to take control back of his own podcast. That's terrible. I've got it for at least one episode more.
Anyway, Tommy Wiseau, you're fired. You're fired.
You are Greg in this context, I guess. With David, he's normally his co-host. Now he's his co-guest. It's Craig McDonald. Oh, hi, Craig.
Do not talk about me in the context of being co-anything to David. I am my own person.
Okay, number 6. So how are you finding this experience? Are you regretting it more or less than when Alex and I made you watch Padsy?
That was just a war crime. That's just unforgivable what you did to me for that episode. What's more unforgivable is Alex also then not showing up and therefore just getting out of that experience. Enjoy this dog film. Bye.
I'm also glad that now you said about watching somebody else do this, Ed, I'm now fully appreciating it. I'm like, all the choices are the right ones because Craig is berating someone else. And somebody else's response is just, okay.
But why would you do that, David? I was leaving you alone. Why would you put yourself back in my radar?
I feel like we've been here for 10 minutes and already we're tearing the podcast apart. Got another hour of this to go.
Wait, what you're saying, Alex, is you're tearing me apart. All the hits already. Anyway, before we do that, I just wanted to talk quickly about bad films in general, because obviously we're moving into award season. We're already sort of in an award season. We've just had the Golden Globes happen. The Oscars are a couple of months away, and with the Oscars, fittingly for this episode, you get the Golden Raspberry Awards. Do any of you follow the Razzies as much as you do the Oscars? How do you find all that?
I think in some ways the Razzies haven't aged well in some respects, because you get a lot of like film journalists especially who kind of go, when they're reacting to things like the Guardian articles, which we mentioned before in regards to Shrek, that kind of like, if you have nothing nice to say, why say anything at all kind of aspect, and where people have like, here's my worst films of the year. A lot of critics and people on YouTube, socials and stuff don't like that kind of stuff anymore. So I think the Razzies have kind of lost their popularity in that way, that a lot of people don't like to celebrate negativity as much as they used to, unless it's something like Donald Trump has brought out a documentary or something, which obviously went down well in previous shows. But I don't know, they kind of slipped under the radar a bit more, I feel.
I also just think the standard of bad we have at the moment is just kind of boring bad. Like, years ago, you would get things which try to be like so ambitious that when they fail, because of absolute naivety, that it's just interestingly bad. Or you have people who are just so up their own arse that they manage to create something so obnoxiously bad that you get Razzie sweeps of Jack and Jill just winning everything and getting more nominations than there are categories. But yeah, at the moment, it's just... I think it's also just because there's so much good content out there as well, that there's not really much of an incentive for people to just go and watch bad stuff anymore. I think there are just enough good options out there that people just sort of ignore it. So half the films that end up turning up are just films I've just never heard of, or they just go for really low-hanging fruit. There aren't any good novelty choices anymore, I think is my big thing.
I think a lot of the films that get called out as bad are called out because they're like problematically bad as well, rather than they're just like kind of funnily bad. Like the film that Sia made recently, which was just like terrible in every single way.
Yep.
Rather than like actual bad films that are kind of fun to watch as well. Although saying that, I've just remembered that the Cats musical exists, and I think that's again another piece of fine cinematography.
Yeah, but we know how you do half of your listening experience.
No, I was entirely sober when I watched Cats. Watched it in the cinema with some good friends. It was a good time.
Yeah, I think I'm all supporting of like James Corden being like, the winner of worst supporting actor for Cats. But then when you get somebody like Tom Hooper for the worst director, you're just a bit like, did he actually direct it badly, or was it just that it just turned into like a complete mess because of everything? Like, that's the weird thing about those moments, etc. Like something like, say this year, if like Space Jam won, then you would be like, you could kind of get on board with it because it's just a very like greedy Hollywood film, so they kind of deserve it in that way. But if it's just someone who had like a creative vision and tried to do it and just did it badly, it just looks a bit, I don't know, sour when you're just like, ha ha ha, look at that, how badly it did. In a way, it's probably worse that it's just forgotten when we're talking about like, mediocre bad films. Whereas, like I said, something like Cats is just famous for how awful it is. So like giving it a Razzie is then almost like, well, are you saying that it's amazing because it's so bad, or are you saying that it is like awful down the lines of like actual, like Alex said, problematic films, etc.?
I did notice when I was looking through as well that The Room obviously didn't make any of those nominations or win any Razzies itself, because at that point it was so bad that nobody actually cared about it. And it was only then when people started attending midnight screenings and shouting along to the screen with their lines and throwing American footballs around the cinema and whatever, that people actually started to take notice of it. And it's only now that, and it's only sort of, as you say, low-hanging fruits or sort of political points. So I just brought up on my screen here like what won last year, and Rudy Giuliani and his pants zipper, or just by himself, depending on which award he's winning, got a couple for Borat's subsequent movie film. I think like Donald Trump got some as well. There was someone, I think, like one sort of right-wing politicos who won a Razzie and said, thank you so much, like, because the sorts of people that follow me on Twitter and all that don't really like sort of Hollywood liberal types. So it seems to be like either political stuff or it's haha, Cats is shit, isn't it? Here, have 6 Razzies for being so shit.
To be fair, although The Room may not have won a Razzie, Tommy Wiseau did pay for it to be in cinemas, specifically for it to be long enough to be nominated for the Oscars. And I respect the confidence. I think he made the right decision.
Yeah, it would have been ironic if then he was then nominated for Razzies due to that decision. But like you said, Ed, I find it weird when Rudy Giuliani wins worst supporting actor, and it's like, how is he an actor? Like, it's just like when they do stuff like that, it's just like Trump, etc. It's not like you see the best category for documentaries or something, like people in documentaries are then nominated for best actor, because it's not a performance.
If you ever want to have a bit of a fun afternoon, reading the first version of The Room script, wonderful. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and the lines are just bizarre. Like, there's a scene where he pours water over his friend, and then he's like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry," and the guy's just like, "Yeah, we'll just talk about your problems now." It's just like, it's so like, has this man never interacted with another human being in his life? I love it. I love it so much.
Have you actually read the the final script? Because it'd be interesting, like, how much difference there is between that and the edit. Because I was trying to think, like, watching The Disaster Artist, how many people went to see that and was like, oh, this isn't what we shot, or like, this is completely different. In the way that he edited it, obviously, with lines like, "You're my favorite customer." I was like, did they just like edit that in, because they shot it badly? Or
I haven't read the script that they actually worked off. I've only read the script because it got leaked not that long ago, and I maybe 2 years ago I read that. It's a good time. I would recommend it.
I think I saw something that one of Tommy Wiseau's sort of things as a director was being very specific about people reading exactly the words that were on the script, and if you deviated even even for 1 second, that was terrible. You might be a terrible actor. Say it again. We're doing this again. So, yeah, even if the things that he said that he'd written down didn't make that much sense, and they were trying desperately to change it to make it normal English in some cases. So the script probably wasn't that actually. That's different, I thought. Apart from maybe 1 or 2 things that would change just by accident, or him. Well, as I said, the flower scene, that him improvising the "Oh hi doggy," because the doggy had just been there, sort of not doing much. And he'd been a bit freaked out by that, so he decided just to, pet him and see what happens.
So let me get this straight, please, because it's almost certain he would have requested the dog to be there, because it wouldn't be like somebody says, "Oh, I brought my dog. Is that okay?" Yeah, that's fine. He had a vision for everything. So just the fact he then went, "Oh, I haven't actually done anything with this dog. Hi, doggy."
I mean, the cast was replaced 3 times, so. Did he replace the dog 3 times? Is that the 3rd version of the dog? Did the dog get paid?
The dog in the final 16 and 17 seconds is actually the 3rd dog from the 1st second. It's a supercut of all 3 different dogs.
Maybe just there wasn't a dog intended at all. Maybe they were just maybe this dog just walked in and was just sat down, and they were just like,
"Is this your dog?" No, it's probably Tommy's dog. It's probably his dog. No. What? Okay. Anyway, so even though we started talking about The Room mostly, I think we just sort of officially move on to that and sort of talk about, sort of try and detail in as many ways as possible, I guess, the ways in which it is bad and how it is bad. Like, did anyone one of the things I was sort of posting in our group chat when we were organising this was how you've got a YouTube video which sort of collates all the parts of the plot and how all the plot-driven scenes, and that's 15 minutes long. Which is compared to the 90 minutes, is it 90 or 100 minutes? The main film it is not that much. I was also quite surprised it was that much. So, did anyone get any sort of actual plot to the film that made much sense?
There's a plot.
Oh no, please, Alex, tell me how many intricate levels of the plot. Go on.
Tommy, misunderstood hero of the entire thing. Obviously, he's got a lot going on. He works in a high-powered job. And his girlfriend, just an awful person who cheats on him with his best mate. And her mum has breast cancer, which was meant to be empowering to women. I started researching that, but I was so confused by the whole concept that I just stopped. And then, because even I wasn't quite on the level to understand that properly, the next part of the plot is that he confronts his friend, and then they find out, and then it's like Romeo and Juliet. They all die.
Wait, they all die? We see one death.
I was almost expecting that almost felt like it could have made more sense to me as I was watching it, that he seemed to be in a, it seemed like he was getting into a murderous state where he was just going to kill everyone.
There did seem to be some assumption that he could still be alive, because that's one of my favorite moments in the film, is just the whole, like, he shot himself in the head and then, they come in like, wake up, Johnny. And it's just like, I don't think he's going to wake up from a gun bullet to the head.
Yeah, it's like blood all over himself. You can see a massive pool. It may as well be a swimming pool of blood behind his head. No, he'll wake up soon. It's just,
He's just messing around. That jokester Johnny. But yeah, with the plot, I always watched it as a, like, okay, this is like a badly made film. You've gone for a very, like, simple plot, because it just seems so, like, soap, like TV drama-esque, and they do stretch it out. So I suppose there is a plot there is story, but it's just because they've gone with such a simple story that they just kind of have to stretch it out for like an hour and a half, I suppose, which, at the end of the day, a lot of very successful Oscar-winning movies to do the same thing of, like, take this simple concept and stretch it out. But yeah, this, I don't know, maybe it's also the visuals and the sets and stuff. It just reminds me of something like Neighbours or something like that, where all the elements come in of, like, the breast cancer and, like, oh, I'm going to leave Johnny, and, like, all the, like, two-person conversations as well.
To be fair, I think Tommy Wiseau always sort of intended it to be like a broader look at human nature. So even though the story is meant to focus on, this triple dynamic, he does want to have a lot of scenes that basically focus on, like, Tommy's relationship to wider humanity, even if conceptually those ideas are, and I quote, fucking moronic. I think it is just a nice attempt, right? Because however many other times are you going to see somebody who wants to show the bonding by letting his best friends have sex in his house out of nowhere, playing football at all given times of the day, including when they're about to be going to some formal function that we never see, having a friend who's a psychiatrist, having pictures of spoons in his house.
It just seems to be like those ones that either the plot points are, like, dragged on interminably, and you have, like, the same scene basically between Lisa and her mother, like, 3 or 4 different times, where they say pretty much the same things, or you just have one line where Claudette has breast cancer, one 90-second scene where Denny does drugs, like, apparent out of nowhere, Lisa's claiming that Johnny hit her, which he did not. It's bullshit. He did not. Because obviously that's that sort of scene as well as one which I've seen loads of times before I'd actually watched the film itself, and I was sort of surprised that it did basically come out of nowhere. Like, we don't see him being told. Like, I mean, that seems like it's a fairly important part of the film, if it's meant to be part of the film, right? Is, he's in this middle of this breakup, potentially, even though he doesn't realise it at the time. And part of this is that she's lying about him hitting her. Maybe he just sort of pushed her later, so maybe he is the sort of person that would do that. I don't know. I don't want to sort of slander a fictional character.
See, I'm hearing you all say that it's repetitive, but I don't think there's one scene in that film that is in any way boring. I think it keeps you guessing at every single turn. And I'm not sure that another film can do that, because you can't predict what's going to happen next. Like, realistically, like, although it follows the most simple plot line of the age-old story of love and loss, I guess, I think it's the most unpredictable film that exists, and therefore it's impossible to be bored while watching it.
Yeah, I was just saying as well that also it seems to be very real life, maybe to the point of being overly real life, because I had a bit written down about all the sorts of clunky dialogue, and, like, when they go to the coffee shop, you see two sets of couples before Mark and Johnny actually ordering their coffee, and then, like, you see them ordering their coffee, like, is it a hot chocolate? Yes please. Medium? Yes please. How about yours? I'll have a tea. On the medium? Yes please. And you get the full happy birthday song, even though I don't think that would happen in most places.
It just seems like he's very intent on having that messaging, doesn't he? And it does help when you know things like the book or, like, the films that have been made afterwards, or just him as a person in general. It's that idea of, he's like, oh yeah, it's typical American thing, and all of this stuff. So, like, in his head, he's put in this there and thinks it makes sense because, like, oh yeah, people play football all the time, and it's like, that's an integral part of the plot. But, like, to other people, they're like, wow, this doesn't make any sense.
And playing football is obviously throwing the football around. It's not like playing football at all. Yeah, of course.
Do we know if anyone's done any sort of analytical breakdown of The Room in comparison to the works of Tennessee Williams, just to see the sort of parallels of writing? Because that is literally how they advertise this film. So my favourite relationship with this film is that I actually entered a quiz which was all about The Room. And I came 10th for 32 when they were in teams and I was on my own. And one of the things they made us do was watch the trailer, and we had to memorise as much as we could about the trailer. And one of them was, this film is the greatest drama since who? And yeah, Tennessee Williams. They do love to try and build on that comparison. And as we'll discuss later with Disaster Artist and how many times it gets referenced there, I just want to know if he genuinely thinks there's something about how Tennessee Williams writes his stories and plays, etc., that he was trying to emulate.
I just like the idea that maybe, like, if we go along with what he's claiming now, which is that it was always meant to be a black comedy, maybe he just really, really hates Tennessee Williams's stories and thinks they're totally horrible, and that's actually just him satirizing Williams.
I think the problem with like the black comedy stuff as well is what other people have said, and it's also said in The Disaster Artist, is that this does seem to be coming from a personal place. There does seem to be this element of like him having elements of his life into the story, or feeling that he wants to portray certain characters in certain ways, because in a lot of ways, I think a lot of people just watch it like, why is this Lisa person such a bad person? Where is this coming from? Like, why are you choosing to go down this line, especially when you do have the dialogue with the mother, which, you know, Alex is right in the sense of it's entertaining when you get those repetitive scenes, because she's like so focused on like, he's a lovely person, you should be with him, he's such a nice person. Like the amount of times in the script he say about how a nice person he is, it's just like, what is Wiseau, like Tommy Wiseau trying to say here? Like what how has he been wronged, and why does he want to like vindicate himself so much?
Yeah, it's like he misread the sort of show not tell, and it's like show and tell, then show and tell again, maybe show and tell it a third time, and then tell it for a fourth time, just to be on the safe side, because you don't know with these audiences, do you?
But also don't show or tell in other circumstances, such as, you know, the hitting and the drugs, and, you know, the party and.
No, that'd be silly. We don't need to see any reason why they've got tuxedos on. I mean, that's what people do, right? If they've got about to have a wedding, they wear tuxedos. What more do you want? Being too picky, David.
Yeah, well, that's where you can just imagine him saying all of that stuff, though, can't you? Like when the couple just randomly has sex in their house, you could imagine people there like, why are we doing this? Where does this come from? And he's like, oh, it's like typical American thing. Like people, you know, like, oh, it's like love and lust, and we need to show that on screen as if it is like this artistic thing. But because of just the way it's shown narratively, we just think like, this has come out of nowhere. Maybe Tommy Wiseau needs to be a more like avant-garde director.
How can you say that? Well, that film was not avant-garde. Jesus Christ. It's the most unique thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's unique, and yeah, a repetition of every like piece of fake American culture that you can possibly imagine. It's beautiful.
I just want to know who did the soundtrack for it, because it's one of the most hauntingly beautiful synth sort of pieces I've dealt with in a while.
So the Wikipedia page for The Room does actually list a soundtrack album, not just songs, the album. It says the score was written by, let's completely mispronounce this name, Mladen Milicevic. Now let's mispronounce the university's name, Loyola Marymount University. So, you know, he's actually, you know, proper music professor who presumably had to like study how to do music.
Yeah, to be fair, their IMDb has got 44 credits. One of them is The Disaster Artist, but it says music department, not composer. So I don't know if it just means that he did the recreation stuff or.
I do think, like, budget-wise, it's impressive that firstly he spent $6 million on this. Where did that $6 million go? I don't understand what part of this film cost that amount of money. Like, in comparison, Reservoir Dogs, I think the budget for Reservoir Dogs was like $1 million. Or like 1.2 million or something.
This probably moves on to what we're talking about next about production values and like where all the money went and how they did beforehand, isn't it? And I think wasn't that most of it like he had two different cameras, like 35mm and HD,
which he outright bought.
Yeah, like most major studios even will just rent them, because why would you want to have cameras laying around your house? So that he bought them. He built a special sort of set so that he could film simultaneously. He then proceeded not to use any of the HD film in the actual final movie. You had to have 2 whole different casts because you had one for the HG and one for 35mm. He went through about 3 different casts because people disappeared because he was a rubbish director and it was very shoddily done, the whole thing. And then he had the billboard that was like lasting for 5 years. I don't know if the $6 million is included in that.
That, I imagine part of the budget would have also been paying for 2 weeks to keep theaters to have it.
Yeah, I kind of want to see this like alternate cut. I think it might be like Blade Runner or Zack Snyder or something. Like one day we're going to have the HD cut of The Room. Like, you know, how we're going to see this totally different looking film. Like that might be the first time in history we've ever had that, in which they're like, hey, you think you know what this film looks like? Now you're going to see it like filmed in this different camera because we filmed them both at the same time, like next to each other.
I do not want to see Tommy Wiseau's ass in HD.
but like Ed said, if there was like different people in it, that would be even more entertaining, especially if they changed from scene to scene.
You know the sex scene with Tommy Wiseau, you know the actress refused to film that a second time. I think they were meant to film it like 3 times for 3 separate sex scenes in the film, and the actress was just like, no, not doing that, not again.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be like 2 minutes long. It's actually, 6 minutes, and you want to put the whole thing in? Because I think don't they just use the same scene, but maybe because they don't have it as long as the original scene was, they just cut out separate parts. So maybe you can't quite tell it's literally the same scene you've just seen, but it is quite obviously the same scene because it's the same people wearing the same things, doing the same stuff. I don't know. I was trying to not look during the sex scenes because it was just so cringy. So I couldn't sort of comment on how obviously they're the same scene.
It's just the music that makes me laugh. That song, just like how cheesy it is. Like, and that's very much a catalog sort of song. And it seems like it's like an advert or something. And then you're like, oh God, like this is, and just the inappropriateness of Denny. Like, where does that come from? Especially like, I suppose we're going back to story kind of stuff here, but what was he thinking with that? Like, why is he like in the bed? Like, I just want to join you guys. And then later on when he's just like, can I kiss you? And like, it's just like, what is going on here? What was he thinking with this?
It did almost feel like at points where, because they do sort of, you know, put in that he is almost like a son figure, that maybe Johnny wanted to adopt him when he was a child as well. So it's like, it almost felt like they did just want to have a 5-year-old, but then they went, you can't have a 5-year-old on set. That's silly. The A, there's like loads of laws, and B, come on now, like just age him up to be a college age student, and you're paying for his tuition and you're paying for an apartment, all that, and then, but we're not going to cut out the bit where, you know, a 5-year-old trying to join you in bed, not quite understanding that you're trying to have sex, might make sense. But Denny doing that.
I mean, Tommy's just a different breed. He's just better than the rest. He's built.
He's a vampire. Vampire's a different breed, right? Or was that just Johnny that was a vampire? I keep forgetting. Tommy wanted to like create sets and like, you know, and maybe have them taken down, and then to actually just bring them back up. I actually wanted that set all along. Why did you take it down? Including like the rooftop, which they couldn't just go onto a normal roof and film there, because that would be normal. That's what normal filmmakers do. Or what Tommy Wiseau did was have I think it was in a car park where they sort of had the little tin sheds, which is a completely impossible entrance from a house, but never mind. And they just CGI'd. Fairly bad. I don't know. I can't remember how CGI was in 2003, but it still looks fairly bad CGI for like a surrounding view.
It's not subtle. Does anyone have any fun theories as to where he got £6 million from?
Drugs.
Or just where all of his money comes from. Again, it's like the lifestyle as well, isn't it?
Where does any of it come from? Where does he come from? No one knows.
I'm telling you, he is somebody who got a taste for drugs, became a massive cartel leader, and just constantly on the stuff. That just is the only thing that explains so much about his life.
And then possibly that's why I think from his accent, he's probably Eastern European originally.
Oh no, I actually do think he is from. Where did he say he's from?
New Orleans is where he says he's from.
I think he is actually from New Orleans, but just the drugs has just altered his accent so much.
I mean, there's a Reddit detective that suggested that he's from Poland, and then thought that maybe his original surname was some Polish surname beginning with W, and then he took that plus the French word for bird, Wiseau, and got from that Wiseau, and then said no, I'm American now, because, well, I mean, you know, when you emigrate to a country, frequently people, just identify as that new nationality. So, he is American. He's not going to mention where he came from before then. Maybe he's running from a cartel and that's where he got his money from. And he doesn't want to be in Europe anymore because he might get killed. Who knows?
I think that's why people do love, like, that is a part of the legacy, and like the following though is just because these days you don't have that. There isn't this element of mystery with anybody anymore because, your entire life is on social media and your name, and you can check out people's like work in the past, etc. So I think it is quite interesting for people that he potentially has come over to America and said, right, this is my name now, was my stage name, and there's just no trace of a previous life. I think that he is like potentially like Eastern European. I think it might be, I don't know, I think I've seen stuff before that some people think that he has a lot of money like invested into like industry or something like that, or there might be like a lot of inheritance from like a family maybe.
I think there was like active theories that it was all from property or something. He had family in the property business.
Which would make sense if he has random flats he's not using in both San Francisco and Los Angeles.
And is just so flippant with his money. I think it would make sense if it is the kind of like something that's just constantly providing an income. Like if he owns like, I don't know, a big estate, like maybe he's from like a really wealthy family. But yeah, I think that's what people like love so much about him as well, is that he's like a modern enigma and people just don't know like for sure. And that's the same appeal with this film, that there's just such a story around it, as we were saying earlier, whereas something like Cats or other bad movies, people were just like, I think was it Terminator, one of the Terminator films like recently, where Emilia Clarke was just like, yeah, everyone knew that film was bad on set, we knew what it was, but it was just like a mediocre like action film, whereas this has just got so many stories behind it, as we've said, like things like changing casts and his weird like ways of directing and the awful time that people had on set. I think it just all adds to the enigma, doesn't it?
That's the thing. So do you think that if we got a time machine, took a copy of the film, went back to 2002 instead of 2003, and then just made the film ourselves, do you think we've got something there that we could beat into it, or is it like part of him himself that actually is the reason why people watch it?
It's very much a passion project for him, right? I think we have too much sense about us that we would just want to do things as faithfully as possible, but there'd just be a small inkling in the back of our heads where we would try and alter things to make a little bit more sense, or if anything, we would try and f*** it up in weirder ways to try and make it weirder, at which point I think that just loses a lot of its sort of authenticity of attempt. Whereas with him, it's very much, he didn't want to make a bad film, right? I don't care what he says, right? Anything he says at this point, he's just lying. He wanted to make a masterpiece. He wanted to have something that would just have a positive stamp on the world, but he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. So I agree with Alex. I do think this is a great film. I do not think he in any way intended it to turn out the way that he did. And in the same way as well, because like David and I have done various sort of film projects before, nothing we have ever done has ever tried to do what he has done. I don't think anyone ever has tried to do what he's done. That's why I just don't think I don't think you can try to do it.
I think it's very much like one of a kind as well. I don't think there's anyone who's attempted anything similar since. And I think like it's all about him as well, because like it's so personal to him, clearly.
You say that, Alex. There was a film a couple of years ago that cast as its two lead actors, Tommy Wiseau and Greg Sestero. I want to say it was just called Best Friends, who clearly were just trying to sort of emulate and profit off of the success of The Room, to a similar degree. So I think they did try and do something similar since, but it failed because the filmmakers knew what they were doing. So at that point, it just comes off as really ungenuine, and it's just, okay, this just feels like a cash grab. And also, the fact they're trying to direct these people seriously just means that their performances come off as weird as here, where it comes off as weirdly artistic.
The unintentional aspect of it is, and that's why it is hard to watch it and be like, no, I don't think you intended this to be a dark comedy, and that's why, like you said, it's more evident when you watch things like Best Friends, because, yeah, I think Greg has, because they have an involvement in that as well, so it's not even like the filmmakers kind of like approached them. I think like Greg is like a writer on it as well, so it's like almost them doing the actual comedy that they Wiseau claimed to have made with The Room, but then Best Friends shows that, if that isn't as funny or isn't funny at all, then clearly maybe he didn't intend to do that with The Room. But I think even when you look at like films, like one that gets thrown around a lot with this is like Birdemic, of like, one of those like awful, terrible films. But to me, that isn't as interesting because it is just so shoddy. Like it's the element of bad student filmmaking, of just like these like terrible CGI effects, etc. So while it's like entertaining to watch for just like how badly it's done, it's just, that's all it is, if you know what I mean. There's no kind of like weird loopholes and like plot holes and like where's this story come from, when it's just people who are doing like really over dramatic acting, like oh my god, and like terrible CGI effects. You see it for 5 minutes and you're like, okay, I get it, it's just bad, but where's this, it does keep your attention because it does keep evolving as like, where did they come from, why are they here, like, and it does make you laugh as to like how complex it is in a way, whereas other terrible bad films that are thrown around in the same way are just bad and there's no depth to them. And while I don't think like The Room has like an artistic depth, there's just a different type of depth of just like, what is this man thinking, what was happening, how did this come to be, why does this not make sense, where did this come from, all of that kind of elements, I guess, in a way. The only similar thing I could think of in terms of like bad movies, and this is not in the same entertainment sort of category as The Room, but it's something like The Last Airbending, which that is very much like they've taken 3 seasons, like an entire season of something, squeezed it into one film. So it means that there's loads of nonsensical stuff happening, and you do have like bad effects and stuff there, which are just comical and stupid. And you're watching it with the lens of like, how did anybody think that this was good, or like thought that this was going well? And that's probably what the people who were making The Room had the reaction of as well, because Tommy was so intent on his vision. And we see it in The Disaster Artist being like, why are you laughing at that? And he's like, oh, because that's the way it should be. So I suppose nobody like that would ever have $6 million to make a movie again, I suppose.
So it's almost talking about whether it's actually then good. Like, are there any parts that I put it down here on my note sheet as any redeeming features, in the sense of, are there any parts you think are actually genuinely good, not like cringily good? I mean, the one section I thought was that there seem to be parts when it almost well, put down like the comedy of it almost becomes like the text of the film rather than just what people take afterwards. So like there are parts when like Claudette and Peter like almost fourth wall break. So Claudette's like, why are these people coming into your house? Why are these characters here? She uses the word characters rather than people, right? And there's like Grand Central Station, like, doesn't Denny have his own kitchen? Like, why is he coming here literally asking for a cup of sugar? Something that never happens in real life ever. And then you get Peter sort of going, acting as psychologist, going, people are people. Sometimes they just can't see their own faults. Stare at camera after telling Tommy that. Probably not Johnny that, right? Tommy. Can't just see their own faults, can they? Were there any other parts that people actually genuinely liked from that, as opposed to just reveling in the horribleness of it?
I think it's all a masterpiece. I couldn't pick a favourite moment. I think it's all impeccably done.
I think for me, Chris R is probably my favourite character in the film, on a few reasons. One, I just think his power and aggression, I just sort of bought into it above the acting of other people. Where, granted, I think that everyone has their own style. He's the one that sort of was the most real to me. Two, I just like the sort of joke idea of he wasn't actually meant to have a gun, that he just lost his temper and just wanted money. Just held a gun to a kid's head for his money.
Well, you say kid, but apparently Denny, the actor, despite being
he's in his mid-20s, yeah.
Is the oldest actor on set, yeah.
Wait, oldest on set, including Claudette?
Okay, out of the other people then, out of everyone else, out of the people who are acting as his parents and all of that, then, out of that main crew.
And Tommy, which is his age is unknown.
What are you talking about? He says several times in Disaster Artist he's about 20.
Yeah.
Sure, and I'm 14. That was one of my favorite parts in Disaster Artist when he's like, "Happy birthday" to the mother.
I also didn't realize until YouTube recommended to me as I was looking through this that "You're Tearing Me Apart, Lisa" comes directly from Rebel Without a Cause.
Yeah.
"You're tearing me apart," when he's sort of talking to his parents. And that also means, fun fact, that James Franco has had a Golden Globe for playing a person who says both of those lines. Because he got one for The Disaster Artist, and he also got one for being James Dean in an early 2000s film. So it turns out that James Franco is second only to Tommy Wiseau in being the king of all of this.
Like, who'd have thought that Tommy Wiseau and James Franco, like, they're not similar people, are they? James Franco being Tommy Wiseau, I think, is kind of wild. And then it's absolutely incredible how close to character he actually is. Like, the portrayal of Tommy Wiseau, like, you forget that you're not watching Tommy in some of the Disaster Artists, in my opinion. I think it's phenomenal.
Especially when they actually show Tommy in the end credit scene, and he has such a different look. Like, he's got short hair, he's got a goatee. It's wild.
I kind of, like, the first time I watched that, I was like, oh, what's going on here? Like, why does he look that way? But then I realized the second watch, I was like, oh, okay, I get it now, because he says at the end of that, where he's like, oh, Greg's friends are weird. Like, so, because I think that scene was meant to be in the scene where he's talking to his actor friend, and he's like, oh, why are you hanging around with him? He's like this weird vampire guy. So I think that scene was meant to be there. So obviously they were trying to disguise him more to, like, make sure that it didn't look like Tommy, that it would be within, the realms of possibility that he would come across somebody who looked a bit like him in real life. But in the context of an end credit scene, you're kind of like, oh, why didn't you just have Tommy Wiseau appear as Tommy Wiseau? But I think they wanted to have him actually, like, in the plot originally, so they disguised him more.
See, I think he's just meant to be playing, like, a person who is essentially just James Franco.
Starring James Franco as Tommy Wiseau, and Tommy Wiseau as James Franco.
Yeah.
Obviously, age range for 2003. Whenever, actually, when is the film set? Because it's released in 2003, but like,
yeah, if we're taking it literally and saying not in the sense of the dialogue's just rubbish, they talk about, like, how Lisa's, like, working in computer things as if that's a fully understandable and complete job title, which can only really be like mid-90s probably.
Yeah, like the Disaster Artist goes from, like, 1999 or something like that, so it kind of does seem like the period in which he, like, wrote it. But yeah, that whole idea of, like, how much he becomes the character kind of rung true for me when, because at first I think when you start watching, you're like, okay, this takes a while because Tommy Wiseau is such a character, it's hard to not see somebody as them imitating that character. But then as the story and film goes on, I think what Alex said is right, is that he does become Tommy Wiseau so much, and, like, that really, like, stuck in my mind the most when it came to the filming of the sex scene in Disaster Artist, in which, like, when it was, like, he was, like, walking around naked and stuff like that, and I was like, oh god, like, you don't want to see Tommy Wiseau naked, like, oh, I don't want to see his ass. I was like, hang on, this is like a Hollywood actor James Franco, like, walking around naked, which in most other films people probably wouldn't complain about. Maybe they would now because of some of the dodgy things that he's been accused of, but it's like, it's just showed then that I was, like, actually like, oh, like, it's Tommy, I don't want to see that. And I was like, oh wait, like, that's not Tommy. So it was really weird to have that moment. But I am curious, I wanted to ask Alex actually, like, what, like, did you go into this film like, oh, this is, like, a terrible film, and you came out like, oh, that's a masterpiece? Is it like, do you enjoy it in, like, oh, I love it because it's so bad, or do you just generally think it is, like, misunderstood?
I don't know how much I can commit to the bit here. I remember very specifically, the first time I watched it for the first time with an ex, and one of my best friends. We all watched it at the same time. And, like, it's just one of those films. I think it's one of the few films that, again, I just can't take my eyes off it. Like, there's no point in that film where I'm thinking, this is a bit boring now, because it's just so bizarre. And I think it's, like, probably more engaging than almost anything else. But it's because it's all unintentional. And I think the beauty of it is that it's unintentional. Well, it's intentional, but, like, the what they've created is unintentional. I think that's just, like, really, really cool. I do have I can see why people would say it's a bad film. I can see like that it is a bad film in the way it's made and the script and all of that sort of thing. But I think it all comes together so beautifully. Like, there's so many bad films that you get 10 minutes into watching, you're like, just can't take this anymore. I can't deal with this anymore. Whereas this, you get 10 minutes and you're like, what are they going to do next? Like, what is happening here? I don't think there's anything that's been created that's like it at all. I also very much distinctly remember one of the first times I met Craig. We were not the first, but like in sub 5 times of meeting Craig. We were in the car traveling quite a long journey to Exeter, and maybe 10-15 minutes in, Craig was like, "Oh, so what is your favourite film?" And I said The Room, and Craig looked very shocked at the time. It was a good time though, and I was like, this could have gone very wrong if I'd told a film podcast co-host 20 minutes into quite a long drive that my favourite film was The Room, and they took me too seriously. So
I obviously did have to question the realms in which you chose the basis of your favourite film, right? I love this film. I can't say it's my favourite film because I think that's sort of an insult to the wider film industry, because you have loads of people who put in probably the same amount of effort and passion as Tommy Wiseau and more, and produce films that would be considered like overly good. If I turned around and said, that's great, but I'm going to go with essentially the meme masterpiece, they'll go, well, what was the fucking point of my life?
I mean, like, genuinely, I sat down the other day and I was like, I'm going to watch a good film today. And I tried to watch Reservoir Dogs, and I got to I've not seen the last 20 minutes of it. I got so bored. It's just so boring. And yeah, that's quite a controversial opinion, I guess. But I do think that...
Burn her. Have you been to then, or would you go to like midnight screenings? Because it's more common in America, but like there's like 1 or 2 theatres in London, for instance. I don't know if this should be like a Well Good Movies road trip that we should do at some point. is go to the Prince Charles Theatre in London and like see one of their things, and maybe post-COVID when you can actually like do because like with the Rocky Horror Picture Show, like you get like, you know, people shouting things along with the screen and sort of throwing things at the screen and all that. With this, you get people throwing like plastic spoons at the screen and throwing American footballs around the place. Is that something you have done or would do? Do you enjoy it that much?
I would 100% do that. If I had the opportunity, I would definitely go to that.
Who wouldn't? Go. Yeah.
Cool. So that's the road trip sorted then, yeah? Okay. We'll lock it in. We'll organise it later.
Well, that's a big, again, appeal of the film, isn't it? It's just that experience. That's what I remember so much about it was, I think, the first time I watched it fully, like sat down and watched it, was in Film Society at university. And it was just such a laugh. It was a room full of people watching it in this like lecture theatre, and we were all just like pissing ourselves laughing. So, you know, it is an experience, and that, you know, and that goes similar to what people have said recently with blockbusters when people are cheering and clapping. It's the same thing. It's the experience which adds to your viewing of the film.
For me, my first time actually properly watching it, because I'd seen film reviews of this film, so I knew the sort of meme big moments. But my first time watching it, we actually played the Tommy Wiseau drinking game. So we did watch it, and some of the rules I remember are take a sip whenever he laughs inappropriately, take a sip when Greg doesn't know what's going on, take a sip when the mother asks a question, take a drink when you see a picture of a spoon. I think it's like down your drink when they start playing football. Like, there's some great moments there. And it was just a great experience.
Is this something that could like just make any film good? Like does this mean there's no distinction between bad films and films that are so good they're so bad they're good, in that you could just take Pudsey the Dog the movie and go, right, we're going to drink whenever an animal takes a shit. We're going to drink whenever, you know, people take Pudsey to... I don't know. I'm trying to remember the film now. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's the problem, Ed, right? You can't remember the film well enough to be able to have those distinction moments. That's maybe why you shouldn't have put me through that. Sorry, I don't know where that came from.
The weird thing I find with this as well, though, is like what you rate it as well. Is like if you're looking at like famous films, etc., or you go to the cinema and you're like, oh yeah, you know, and you wanted to review it, or like in your head you're thinking like, yeah, so, you know, 5-star film, etc. But that's why it's weird with The Room. I've never been able to be like, how could you like actually write a review or rate it in the same way? Because there was something I saw for university years ago, and it was I think it was Roger Ebert said about like, you know, what is the best ranking system? And he said, oh, in some ways it might be I think what was called like the Laughing Man, and it was like showing how much he was enjoying it. It was like a symbol of like a man asleep, and then like it was a man like sort of like engaged, and then like a man like laughing his head off or like enjoying it, which kind of fits with this film. It's like if you saw that in a review, you're like, oh yeah, it's a fun time. It's like keeps you really engaged. But in terms of like, could you give it 5 stars because it's like really badly written and edited and that, but it's enjoyable. So I don't know. I've never been able to it's probably the one film I've never been able to say, oh yeah, I could rate that. Something like even the shark films, Sharknado, you could say, oh, it's it's got its appeal, but you'd still give it 2 stars for whatever reason, etc.
So I have actually seen a rating system that I think is actually quite good for films. It was developed by, or not developed, but certainly utilized to full extent by Jello Apocalypse for their review X film in 10 words or less. But it's essentially the bell curve. So essentially it's the ranking from 10 to 0, but then also from like 0 to -10. So essentially, what constitutes like the bad form of bad is the closer to you are to 0, the worse it is, because -10 is like ironic enjoyment. So it's very much, this film doesn't represent the traditional factors of what a good film should be, but there are elements that make it so that you can fully enjoy this film. And I think The Room is like the perfect example of a -10 film. It goes against the entire curve of what a good film should actually be, and yet it produces a fantastic outcome. Because like 0 is essentially there's no value to this film. You cannot say that of The Room.
Yeah, so Letterboxd essentially needs to add a minus system to their app.
Yeah.
I do think the other fun way to interpret this film through ranking systems is to note that The Room does pass the Bechdel test.
The last time I properly watched this film, I watched it along with Kiara, a regular sort of a regular guest on this podcast. I don't think she's talking to me anymore because she very much, let's just say, could not see the full joy of this film, but very, very much read this from the perspective of an incel, i.e. that the way that women were generally portrayed through the film was very just like women are inherently evil, and she was just very livid throughout, which is kind of an interesting way.
They do have conversations around things that aren't men, so
like breast cancer,
and they plan a birthday party, and they talk about real estate for a bit as well at some point. So
I think it is 2 men who own the real estate, so it might just be the breast cancer. I don't know.
Also, they're organising a birthday party for a man.
She talks to Michelle about real estate.
Okay, I mean, let's be fair. The Bechdel test is not a perfect system. There are films that are very powerfully feminist that fail the Bechdel test.
Such as?
Moana.
Does it fail the Bechdel test?
Yeah, because technically only one woman in the film is named.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because even though she talks to the grandmother a lot, not named.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
So one of the many memes of the film, or ways that the song has been memed, is through the Gregory brothers doing a songify mashup of the film and turning it into a good song, which I believe Craig knows more about.
Yeah, I utterly adore this video. Essentially, the Gregory brothers will just take a lot of clips and just put them through a lot of auto-tune. So I think some of the examples that we were talking about earlier were things like they've done presidential debates, they've done various news reports. I think one of the more popular ones, I'm happy to be wrong on this because it was David who told me this, but the Ain't Nobody Got Time for That sort of remix song came from them. But they were requested to do The Room a couple of years, and I just listen to it every now and then because it's, even though it's obviously auto-tuned as hell, it's actually quite a good tune. But obviously the chorus has like a very strong line, which I think everyone couldn't sort of get involved in, which is just a lot of cheeping. So I am actually trying to learn all of the words to this song, but it's quite difficult because there's a part where it's just, they're just saying hi to loads of different people. So getting the order of that is a bit difficult.
I'm finding it hard to imagine most of this song, Craig. Can you give us maybe a sample of some of it?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I will sing the chorus and then talk about some of my favorite parts of this song. I did not hit her. Oh, hi, Mark. Lisa, Lisa, you're tearing me apart. You know what they say. Love is blind. Let's go, huh? Everything is fine. Cheep, 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 cheep. I don't mind. Cheep, 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 cheep. Everything is fine. Cheep, 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 cheep. Cheep, 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 cheep. You're tearing me apart. Oh, hi, Mark. So yeah, that's the chorus. And there's basically scenes where they've just taken like his speech at the birthday party and sort of mashed that together. And the end just sort of gets a bit chaotic. But my favorite auto-tune line of that is that they've taken the scene from Denny's confrontation with Chris R. And they've just auto-tuned very highly the "What kind of drugs do you take?" which is just a fantastic moment. But yeah, there's just so many memes about the film, which are just great. I mean, thankfully people don't make the memes because the film just does it itself.
My favourite bit about that is that where I live with friends, and my room is almost entirely soundproof unless you stand right outside my door. So as Craig starts singing, my 3 or 4 of my flatmates are just in the hallway outside my door. And I've had some very concerned texts. They were like, "Alex, you said you were busy and it was important. What is going on?" And I don't know how to answer that. So
we're singing about the room. How more important do you want to get? Cheap, 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 cheap.
It does just show though, that song, how fantastic it is just to like those moments, even apart from them existing on their own, that it can make something so unique in itself as well. You know, it's just like all of those lines, you know, like the cheap cheeps and, you know, like love is blind, you know, like you hear that and you're just like, wow, that actually does sound really poetic and kind of meaningful, but it's kind of like in this really weird out of context bit of a film in which he's like, you know what they say, love is blind, and but it actually like does sound like it really fits in this like kind of like crazy.
Yeah, didn't that line become your favorite
song.
line of the film at one point? You were just like, oh, he's so sweet and naive saying it.
I think it was more for the song that I liked it, but yeah, maybe it continued to make me laugh in the film as well.
It's a good sort of gateway drug then, sort of to just have the song and sort of show people that. And this is actually a very cool film. It's very, very poetic and melodramatic and all that. And then sidle them into the rest of the film later, maybe, when they can appreciate the ironic enjoyment of it.
Like Craig said, it's just like, what kind of drugs did you take? But then when you watch the original scene again like that, it is just hilarious, how frantic she is. And, it's just great how that song can just capture all of that. And it's just a catchy song at the end of the day as well. It's just so, yeah, it's just funny how, it's got all the things them doing the chicken stuff and them throwing around the ball. And so the song itself is so much about the infamy of the film. But then becomes its own thing as well. So it just shows what a meme machine that movie is.
Yeah, that, and they also really emphasize the "I love you as a human being" line.
I think now normally, at this point, normally in podcast episodes, we would go to the movie vault to see if we wanted to put episodes in. Do we have access to the movie vault for this episode, or does having control of the whole episode mean we can do that?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Are you going to regret it when the question is next? I'm going to next ask, which is, does The Room deserve to go into the movie vault? We can also talk about the disaster artist as well, if you want to, because we've talked about that today. So we just said I had a yes from Craig. Anything from David?
I just want you all to remember that I know vaguely where all of you live, and I think that's a decision.
No, I think the fact that this is often referred to as the Citizen Kane of bad movies, I think I would be all up for it as well. And I think that the disaster artist would probably be more of a conversation, but yeah, I think that we've just talked enough about the legacy, and like I said, because it is hard to say, do you say it's 5 stars because it's so entertaining, or is it 0 because it's so badly made? It's just because it's such a unique film.
I also think this is slowly becoming the most profitable bad movie of all time, right? Because obviously when it first opened, it took a pitiful amount of money in comparison to its budget. But because of how much it's being viewed in the midnight showings and just all of the things around it, it has now gone into a profit because of its status. And I just don't see other films like that doing that sort of same thing. And I definitely think it goes in, right?
Yeah, because we've often on here, even if it like justifies other entries such as Good Luck Chuck, you know, we do have in the movie vault a mix of good and bad, and you know, you have to have the best of the best in terms of if it is, you know, a bad movie. But yeah, it's just so entertaining, and I suppose if somebody was to look at this as a kind of example of bad filmmaking, they would see all the tropes there, like weird CGI, like nonsensical dialogue, strange scripting problems, but then they would also see it for the amazing fun time it is because of its, you know, infamy and its legacy, and just how it actually does show a lot of, you know, flair. And as I said earlier, you know, avant-garde filmmaker, and Craig was like, well, you know, it is because it is so original.
Also, just how many bad films have films made about them, right? I think the Disaster Artist sort of exists and sort of justifies the wide legacy discussion that happens around the room, which means we've got to have it as representation.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing about Disaster Artist. It adds to that kind of slew of films which are about that. I don't know whether you could say that it started the trend, but obviously they had Ed Wood, which was the Tim Burton film like years ago, which was about a filmmaker who like famously cut corners, etc. You also have Dolomite Is My Name with Eddie Murphy, who's very much again like a sort of cult filmmaker, which had like purposely like low budget, you know, like strange films, which was like, you know, that biopic, if you will, was like made for Netflix. So, and that, you know, did come out after the Disaster Artist. So it's strange how that's like a type of movie in itself. But yeah, as to Disaster Artist, I don't know. I just don't know if it's a good telling of that story, but I don't know if it's a kind of well crafted enough film in itself.
I think, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've had an explicit rule of only putting one film into the vault anyway, but I think that if we're going to be putting anyone from here, I think we're unanimous that the Room should go in, and then even if you're not unanimous about the Disaster Artist, about the Room is enough. So there we go. The Room goes into the movie vault.
We're in the Endgame now.
So it's Endgame time with me, your host for this section. The description of this game, what is this game? I didn't actually come up with a name for it, but it is, there will be 10 questions, and it is reviews of films, and then I will give you the options of what those reviews could be talking about. But all of the reviews are negative because I felt like we needed some more negativity.
I love this game.
So there will be 3 options for each one. If you just message me your option, and then I'll ask it for you out loud so that there is no cheating going on and that no one can change their answers. Does that sound all right? Is everyone happy? Is everyone ready? So the first quote is, blank is like taking a bus trip with someone who has needed a bath for a long time. It's not merely bad, it's unpleasant in a hostile way. Is that A, Battlefield Earth, B, Plan 9 from Outer Space, or C, Zardoz?
Can you say it once more?
The quote or the options?
Yeah, the quote.
Blank is like taking a bus trip with someone who has needed a bath for a long time. It is not merely bad, it's unpleasant in a hostile way.
And then the options again are?
A, Battlefield Earth from 2000, B, Plan 9 from Outer Space, 1959, or C, Zardoz from 1974. Oh, I have an answer from Craig. Okay, so Craig, can I have your answer?
I think it's Battlefield Earth.
And David?
I went for Zardoz, and I put in brackets if that's how it's spelled.
You spelled it correctly, but unfortunately, it is the wrong answer. With the correct being Battlefield Earth. Well done,
I thought that might be the case.
It's because it said it was hostile. I thought, oh, well, it sounds like it's more like centered on like one entity.
Yeah, I just know that Battlefield Earth was, again, trying to be, you know, a standard sort of action film, but everything about it was so awful. I know a lot of people thought it was sort of aggressively bad. So that's why I just put it down.
I remember the John Travolta. So
Yeah.
Oh, John. So, question 2. The quote is, "It's every bit as atrocious as you may have heard. Nay, it's worse." And your options are A, Glitter, 2001, B, Jack and Jill, 2011, or C, even, Jiggly, 2003.
Is that Geely by any chance?
I don't know, Gigli. Geely? Maybe.
Yeah. All right. Could you spell neigh for me, by the way?
Nay.
Cool. So it's not the neigh of a horse. That's good to know. I just thought we'd trip it up if there was like a horse-related film there, and somebody just trying to be funny and putting a pun.
Craig, what was your answer?
I think it's Jack and Jill, but that's because I've seen it and I would use that description.
And David?
Yeah, I went for Jack and Jill as well, because I think out of those three, that seems the one that is the most awful.
To be fair, I did remember that you'd both watched this film. However, unfortunately, you're both incorrect, and the answer was C. Gigli. I don't know how you say it. I still don't know how you say it. I've not seen it. And I'm not a fan of it.
Interestingly enough, Geely is the film that beat out The Room to Best Picture at the Razzies that year.
Just checking. That is Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, because the famous quote from that film has appeared on this podcast before.
Yeah, that's why I've been misinformed about this film. I thought, I was like, oh, it must be a fun time.
Yeah, because it's it's basically she's in bed and she says, "It's turkey time." Huh? Gobble gobble.
A film of thunderous oafishness that gives adult subject matter the kind of bad name it does not need or deserve. And your options are A, Basic Instinct 2, Risk Addiction, B, Showgirls, or C, 50 Shades Darker.
Oh God, that's a hard choice.
Can you say it again? Say the quote.
A film of thunderous oafishness that gives adult subject matter the kind of bad name it does not need or deserve.
And the options again, sorry.
1, or A, Basic Instinct 2, Risk Addiction, from 2006. B, Showgirls, 1995. C, 50 Shades Darker, 2017. Okay, both answers are in. We'll start with David this time. David, what answer did you go for?
I went for 50 Shades Darker just because of the adult themes, but
I went for Showgirls because I think they do talk about adult films in that film badly, but I'm focusing on the thunderous oafishness.
Well, the answer was, in fact, B, Showgirl.
see, when I hear thunderous oafishness, all I could think of was something like Mad Max Thunderdome or something like that. So once that wasn't the options, I was like...
The moment I heard Showgirls, I thought it was like that. The moment I heard 50 Shades Darker, I was just like, that could complicate things.
See, somebody was talking to me recently about Dreamgirls, and that's where I got confused. I was like, well, what's that doing there? And when you said 1995, I was like, oh, wait, this is a different film.
Okay, on to number 4. Even if we put whitewashing aside for a moment, blank fails in so many avenues. It's boringly told sci-fi movie, blandly directed action movie, and a deeply shallow adaptation of some pretty excellent source material. And the options are A, The Last Airbender, 2010, B, Ghost in the Shell, 2017, or C, Star Trek Into the Darkness, 2013.
Oh, that's tough. Can you say the quote once more?
Even if we put whitewashing aside for a moment, blank fails in so many avenues. It's a boringly told sci-fi movie, a blandly directed action movie, and a deeply shallow adaptation of some pretty excellent source material. Ooh, I have both the answers. Craig, would you like to reveal what film you picked?
It's surely got to be Ghost in the Shell.
And why did you pick Ghost in the Shell?
So obviously the Scarlett Johansson being cast was a massive issue at the time. It is a sci-fi film. It is an action film, and it technically is the only one of the two sci-fi given, which is a direct adaptation, as opposed to Star Trek Into Darkness, which technically just uses elements from Wrath of Khan as opposed to just completely remakes it.
Yeah, I went for Ghost in the Shell. I was going to go for Last Airbender, but when you said it again and I heard sci-fi, I was like, oh, okay, because to me, Last Airbender has more whitewashing in terms of the amount of characters, but then Ghost in the Shell has a very infamous case of that. And yeah, then once it was sci-fi, I was like, well, you can't really call Last Airbender sci-fi. And the same thing with Craig. It's like Into Darkness is not so much like a direct adaptation.
You are both correct. It was indeed.
Yeah.
Yay! I've never been happier for David to get points in an Endgame.
I've never been more unhappy that Craig's had a point in an Endgame.
Okay, on to number 5. The film's premise is thinner than the heroine's G-string. Is it A, striptease, B, Basic Instinct 2, or C, burlesque? You've had the answers in. Craig, would you like to reveal your answer?
This is a hard one. I ended up going with burlesque.
Okay, and David?
I went for striptease because I thought that because it was talking about a central protagonist, whereas I thought the other films seemed to have like a sort of collective cast.
Yeah, and that logic has done David well because it was in fact A, striptease. Cool. Moving on to question 6. Every time Depp gave a phlegmy little stammer and jauntily uttered lines like, "I say, old bean," I wanted to bop him on the same with a rotten tangerine. So your options are A, Alice in Wonderland, B, The Lone Ranger, or C, another one that I can't pronounce, Mordecai.
Mordecai, yeah, the Johnny Depp. Say the quote again, sorry, just the...
Every time Depp gave a phlegmy little stammer and jauntily uttered lines like, "I say, old bean," I wanted to bop him on the head with a rotten tangerine. Cool. David, what did you pick and why?
I went for Mordecai because I don't believe he says old bean or anything like that in Alice in Wonderland. He's a bit more like weird and goes Scottish and stuff in that film. And the second of what was the second one again?
The Lone Ranger.
Lone Ranger, yeah, same thing because he's doing like Native American in that. I can't imagine you'd say old bean in that either.
Craig?
I also put Mordecai. Again, just sort of thinking about the types of voices. I know that people hated sort of Depp's voice specifically in that film.
You are both correct. It was C, Mordecai.
Cool.
Question 7, and we are almost neck and neck with David trailing by 1 point.
Wait, is it 1 point between us?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was 2 because I thought there's 2 that I got right that David got wrong.
David got 1 right that you got wrong.
Oh yeah, of course.
I'm keeping score carefully. Don't worry.
Sorry.
Don't forget striptease.
Perfect. Number 7. It tries awfully hard. In the end, it tries our patience. Is it A, W.E., B, Grace of Monaco, or C, Swept Away?
I'm really sad that none of the options are it, because I thought that'd be a really smart way of tripping
That's
us
what I
up.
thought it was going to be.
Craig, what was your answer?
I've gone for Grace of Monaco because I just think it sounds like the one that's going to be the biggest sort of production. So therefore sort of trying hard, but potentially just trying our patience.
David?
I went for Swept Away. My initial thoughts were, well, if something's going to try your patience, then maybe it's like a story in which there's some form of sweeping away or something like that. So I don't know. But after I was like, oh, it could be Grace of Monaco.
Well, I'm pleased to reveal that you're both wrong, and it was W.E.
Okay.
A film that I've never even heard of. There is 8, 9, and 10 left. Question 8. A movie that beats you into submission and makes you wonder if the sun will ever come out again. Is it A, Alien vs. Predator, B, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, or C, Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus? David, what was your answer?
I went for Batman v Superman because I think this is the first one that I actually have seen. This seemed familiar. So I thought beaten into submission, there's a fight in it, Superman, I don't know. It just seemed like something like Shark versus Octopus, etc. is like more of a fun, terrible. So, and what was the first option again?
It was Alien vs Predator.
Yeah, whereas again, that is terrible as well. So that's the fight aspect. But I don't know. It was because it was beat into submission, which seemed like something Batman, Superman could do to Batman.
And Craig, your answer?
I also had Batman v Superman. My logic for it was, I think it's the only one of those three that I can see people genuinely being disappointed at not liking. Therefore, the sort of will the sun ever rise again is sort of, you'd only say that if you cared about something deeply. I just don't know how many people would care about Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus in the same way, and also Alien versus Predator is going to be seen as such a cash grab. I just don't think people have the same emotional investment.
You are both correct. And it was Batman vs Superman, a film that I watched the director's cut of because my dad wanted to, and it will be many hours of my life that I will never get back.
And yet, the better version.
It was so tiring.
I mean, I've not seen it and I refuse to, but apparently it is the better version.
Well, on to question 9. Every truly awful movie epic has a point of no return. A moment when the accumulated bad lines and bogus sentimentality become so cloying that the best defense against a mounting queasiness is an awed amusement. Is it A, The Postman, 1997, B, The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1981, or C, Postman Pat, the movie, 2014?
When you said The Postman, I was like, Postman Pat? And then when you said the second one, I was like, oh, they're all Postman films. I can't tell if this... Oh. So many questions.
David, what was your answer and why?
I was thrown with the whole epic thing, but I'm just going to go for it because maybe that's what this review's going for in terms of irony, so I went for Postman Pat.
I went for The Postman. I know that people had a massive problem with that film. However, I've been regretting it ever since because I feel like the very end of the review might lean towards Postman Pat.
I can reveal that the answer is, in fact, A, The Postman.
I've won!
Oh, damn it. I was between those two. I was like, oh, The Postman Rings Twice. That's not going to be an epic.
Wow.
Let's go through the last question anyway.
So, blank does not chew scenery. Blank starts neatly at each corner of the set in every scene and swallows it whole, co-stars and all. Is it A, Nicolas Cage in Vampire's Kiss, B, Jack Nicholson in Batman, or C, Faye Dunaway in Mummy Dearest?
Oh, so it's an actor this time as opposed to a film?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Surely.
Craig, what was your answer and why?
I feel like Nicolas Cage is there as a trick, so I've gone Faye Dunaway.
And David?
I went for Nicolas Cage because I went with the what people do in the Endgame challenges of like, that seems like a very Alex thing to put in there as well.
Well, I can reveal that the answer to the last question is C, Faye Dunaway.
No! Damn it.
Which means the final scores are Craig with 7 and David with 4.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Damn it.
The streak continues.
I know, I had so much to prove in this.
That means I also... Oh, so there's a particular reason why, listeners, I'm very happy about this, because this is where we're going to be introducing the brand new format for Well Good Movies, which is this. We told you that we're going to be allowing some ability for people to know what films are going to be coming up in the future. This is the way we're going to be doing it. Essentially, David and I have chosen a film each, which will be based on the type of the discussion of the episode that has come up, which we will then pose to the winners as basically their option as of what we discuss in the next week's episode. So in this situation, because I'm the winner, I get to choose the film that will be discussed in our brand new format starting next episode onwards. So David, are we excited?
I guess so. It depends what it's like compared to mine.
Okay, so actually, first of all, before we talk about what will actually be done, I'm interested to know what film you would have chosen.
It's also noting as well that there will be flexibility for people to choose, have their choice as well.
Yes, there is
they'll
also
have
that.
our options. Yeah, so there'll be our options and their choice. So we might never get our choice again. We have to use this while we can. I went for the 2007 film Stardust. Due to The Kingsman has recently come out, I thought a nice time to go back to the early days of Matthew Vaughan's career. A lot of people are also very surprised when Charlie Cox sort of started his career there, and everyone loves Charlie Cox because, you know, he's a bit of a daredevil, and he has recently been speculated and talked about because of a certain film.
Interesting. So here is what will actually be discussed in next week's episode. When we discussed this format, David told me that what I should try to do is one of two things. One, try and think of something that has a bit of legacy behind it that people could have, you know, some degree of interest in. And B, if there is a way in which it could be somewhat connected, even if it's a very loose connection, that is how we'll do it. And thankfully, because of the discussion we had today, my film fulfills both. So it is a... David, do you know what it is? You probably don't know what it is.
Oh, okay.
What do you,
I was
what do you
worried
think
there.
it is?
No, you go on.
Okay. It's a film from 2009, which has a later sequel. Here are the ways it's connected. In terms of a legacy, it is featured. It features a character that has a string of books and other films and other media properties behind them. And this is an interpretation of this character that I've never seen, that I'm actually interested to do. And usually it's only the podcast in which I get to do it. The second link to this episode is twofold. One, we've obviously had some discussion of Disaster Artist. Two, we briefly mentioned the idea of Ed Wood. What that is basically we're looking at films about filmmakers. And there's another one that I think a lot of people sort of put into that in terms of the, you know, films about famous film stars, film creators, which is Chaplin. Chaplin obviously starring Robert Downey Jr. So, Robert Downey Jr., alongside a literary character from history with lots of media properties, notably from the world of Arthur Conan Doyle. So, Ed, I can already see you smiling at this. So, Ed's already twigged. So, Ed, would you like to tell everyone what we're going to be looking at next week?
My specialist subjects at Mastermind, Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes! And yeah, that is the third additional link as well. Sherlock Holmes. So that is going to be our episode for next week. I'm looking forward to it. Hey, David, are you excited?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, recently I wanted to rewatch those films because I never saw the sequel either. So, yeah, I did see the original one in the cinema, but I kind of wanted to revisit it because a lot of people do have a lot of affection for that. And yeah, we're still in that, you know, late 2010, 2000s era. So kind of has that era I was going for as well.
So that is my prize for the Endgame.
Right, so, well, thank you guys for taking over an entire episode for us to give us a nice break there, you know, at the beginning of the new year. And yeah, it was very refreshing to see those roles reversed. And yeah, we've got obviously our new format, which Craig's just gone through there. That's going to be really exciting for the new year. And the great thing about it is that everyone at home can get involved as well. So as, you know, the winners and the films are chosen, we'll be putting those out on socials. So if at home you want to watch along with us, so, you know, same as Craig, if you've never seen Sherlock Holmes, it won't be like previous episodes. We won't be sort of springing these films on you. You can kind of go, oh, I'm going to watch Sherlock Holmes before that episode, and you can kind of like talk about it with us. So we, you know, want more suggestions like that in terms of like what films do you want to see us discuss, whether they should go into the movie vault. That'll be, you know, our big questions from now on, focusing on these movies. So yeah, we got a great start, and from there on in, it'll be interesting to see where they go each episode in terms of how we link them in, how they're relevant at that time. So it's going to be an exciting time. We got lots of new guests on the way as well. So yeah, we're looking forward to it. But yeah, thank you once again, Ed and Alex. I hope you've enjoyed your prize, and we're sure to have you back again soon. Anything lastly you want to say, Alex? How was hosting the Endgame?
It was all right. I don't think I've quite got Craig's charisma yet, but we'll get there eventually. We'll do it again. It's all right. Me and Ed will win another challenge and put you through some more terrible films.
Go watch The Room.
Go watch The Room and watch Twilight. That's it. It's my advice to the people.
Ed, anything lastly from yourself?
Here, have your podcast back. It's been a joy having it for one episode.
Well, we're glad you enjoyed, guys. So thank you very much for everything you've done. It's been a really fun start to the new year. Yeah, and go check out, if you haven't seen how Ed and Alex won this prize, then go check out the Endgame Champions Cut, as we called it. In terms of ourselves, you can catch us on all the socials. As I said, we'll be posting frequent updates now with sort of like fun trivia and, you know, more info of the films we'll be covering, what's in the vault, etc. So, and then we'll be talking about next episode. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be talking about Sherlock Holmes from 2009. So, yeah, catch us on all the socials at Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Well Good Movies. You can also catch us on our website, which is freshtakehub.com/wellgoodmovies, where you can catch all of our episodes, and you can subscribe over on places like Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. Make sure you review on iTunes if you can. It helps us out an awful lot. And you can also interact on Spotify as well. We have things like questions that go up on there. You can follow us there as well. Anything you can do to sort of like, share, support us is all very much appreciated. So, Craig, anything lastly from yourself?
2-0, David. 2-0.
In my head, I even said this the other day. It's like 3-0, especially when we've gone on to other podcasts.
Oh, yeah, it's 3-0.
Yeah, beating me at other games. So, yeah, we'll have to have you guys back just so we can do another challenge and I can try and win. But at least I didn't do too poorly.
It'll be best out of 7 this time, right? Okay.
So, yeah, well, thank you for joining us, guys. Everyone at home, we hope you join us on the next episode talking about Sherlock Holmes, and have a good one. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.
Just usually at this point, I would be messaging David privately, being like, all right, move it on. I can't do that.
I mean, you've effectively just done it.